The box I was never supposed to open. Some things look harmless until they quietly ruin your day or your entire life. It was one of those miserable, gray mornings where the rain came down harder than the forecast had predicted. I was hurrying toward the downtown subway station, using a crumpled newspaper I'd grabbed from a trash bin as a makeshift umbrella. Water still streamed down my face, soaking my collar and fogging my glasses. I kept my head down, eyes on the wet sidewalk, trying not to step in the deepest puddles. A metallic rattle cut through the sound of the rain, coins shaking in a paper cup. I didn't look up. I just patted my jacket pocket and kept walking, the universal signal for "I've got nothing for you. You're carrying exactly $8.75, a rough voice called out. I stopped mid-step. That was right, 2 subway fares plus the extra quarter I'd brought for a shopping cart later. How the hell could he know that? The man stepped directly into my path. He was tall and gaunt, with messy, reddish-orange hair plastered to his head from the rain. His face was weathered, with a prominent hooked nose and large ears that stuck out slightly. His grin revealed uneven, stained teeth. He didn't look dangerous exactly, just strange, like someone who had lived rough for a long time. "You've got something for me," he said in a low, almost playful tone. "I'm sorry, I really need to get to work," I replied, trying to sound polite but firm. I adjusted the soggy newspaper over my head. Before I could move around him, he turned, bent down, and picked up a large wooden box from his makeshift setup on the sidewalk. A damp blanket, some soggy cardboard, and a yellow bucket half full of rainwater. He pushed the box toward me. It was heavier than it looked. I instinctively grabbed it with both hands so it wouldn't drop on my shoes. "Don't open it," he said quietly, his eyes locked on mine. "Keep the lid shut, no matter what." I started to protest. "I can't take this on the train." But when I looked up again, he was already gone, vanished into the heavy curtain of rain. A loud thunderclap made me jump. Lightning flashed across the street, and I broke into a jog toward the station entrance, the box tucked awkwardly under my arm. At the turnstile, I struggled. My hands were full, and I couldn't reach my wallet easily. A transit officer nearby noticed and stepped over. I handed him the box for a second while I swiped my fare. He held it, turning it over with clear curiosity. For a moment I considered leaving it with him, but something made me snatch it back before he could ask any questions. I hurried onto the platform. On the crowded morning train, I tried to act like the bulky wooden box was no big deal. I avoided eye contact with other passengers, but I could feel a few of them glancing at it. My jaw was tight. A headache was starting behind my eyes. At one point, a big guy sitting next to me leaned over. "I'll take that off your hands," he muttered, reaching toward the box. I pulled it away sharply. "No thanks." When the doors opened a couple stops early, I got off and walked the rest of the way to the office in the pouring rain. My boots squelched with every step. By the time I reached my building, I was soaked. In the elevator, 2 colleagues, Mark and his boss, Rachel, got on. Mark smirked when he saw me dripping wet, clutching the strange box. "Rough morning?" he asked, barely hiding a laugh. I didn't answer. I turned my back to them, shielding the box with my body as the elevator rose. My finger caught a splinter from the wood, and it stung badly. As soon as the doors opened on my floor, I rushed to my office, locked the door, closed the blinds, and turned off the lights. Finally alone, I sat at my desk and really examined the box for the first time. It was made of dark, weathered wood. 2 old leather straps with brass buckles held the lid down, reinforced by multiple zip ties and what looked like 100 thin rubber bands wrapped tightly around it. A tiny padlock, no bigger than my pinky tip, secured the front clasp. The man had told me not to open it. But why had he given it to me? Why had the transit officer and that guy on the train seemed so interested? I shook the box. Nothing rattled. It felt empty. I had to know. One by one, I removed the restraints. The leather straps had single words burned into the underside. Greed on one, envy on the other. I tossed them in my desk drawer. The zip ties were labeled in black marker, hunger and yearning. They joined the straps. As I cut through the rubber bands, they snapped with small sounds that, in my tired mind, almost seemed to whisper curiosity. The tiny lock was stubborn. After failing with a paperclip, I grabbed my heavy metal stapler and smashed it repeatedly until the lock finally broke. I yanked the lid open. The hinges creaked. Inside, there was nothing, just empty space. I reached in, sweeping my hand across the bottom, desperate to find something I'd missed. My fingers brushed against the wood. There, engraved in simple, clear letters at the very bottom of the box, was one single word. I traced it slowly with my fingertip, reading it again and again in the dim light of my office. Nothing. Some things you inherit aren't gifts. I used to believe that dying would feel like falling asleep in the back seat as a kid. Warm, safe, barely noticing when someone lifts you out and carries you inside. You just drift off knowing you're home. Growing up taught me how wrong that hope was. It started with my mother. The cancer came back aggressively. By the time the doctors told us it had spread too far, chemo would only add suffering. She fought it anyway, but the disease won slowly and brutally. Toward the end, she wasn't really herself anymore. The tumor on the side of her head made even rest impossible. She gasped for every breath in that sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fading lavender lotion. I wish my last memory of her had been peaceful, a quiet letting go, like an old friend arriving. Instead, it was raw terror. Her eyes wild, body straining desperately for air. Then came the violent coughing fit that sprayed a fine mist of blood across my cheek. She died right after that, exhausted and still fighting. At her funeral, she looked calm, almost like the mother I remembered. The mortician had done what modern medicine couldn't, removed the visible damage. They lowered her into the ground, and for the first time in months, she seemed at rest. A few years later, my father started his own battle. A brain tumor in a spot too dangerous to operate on. The fear of ending up like Mom nearly broke him. Several times my uncle and I had to talk him down from the edge. He was terrified of a slow, painful decline. Eventually, he agreed to treatment. Chemo stopped the growth for a while, but it changed him. He became different. Not completely gone, just slightly off, forgetful, sometimes distant. Every few weeks, he would ask me the same unsettling question. How terrible would it be if cancer was contagious? No matter what I said, he would reply with a hollow smile. You're all lucky I'm holding this thing back. Then he'd change the subject like nothing had happened. The tumor would shrink with radiation, only to creep back. Each round left him a little more altered. But there were good stretches too. Weeks where he was almost his old self. Funny, warm, the dad I could talk to about anything. Until one Friday evening. I'm so tired, Emily, he told me while I washed dishes. I'm fucking exhausted. Can I rest now? I should have said yes. Instead, I gave him the same encouraging words I always did. You're doing better. Just keep fighting a little longer. I didn't turn around. I kept scrubbing plates, pretending I didn't understand what he was really asking. The next morning, I found him hanging from the ceiling fan in his living room. It was quicker than Mom's death, but still not the gentle exit he deserved. They buried him beside her, exactly where they used to sleep. His side, her side. So close, yet impossibly far apart. And now I'm writing this because the same thing is happening to me. I can feel it growing. Right where a drop of mom's blood landed on my face all those years ago. I know how insane that sounds, but the fear is real. I hear it in my head some nights, whispering. You never asked your dad if it was contagious, did you? It wakes me up drenched in sweat. The dreams are getting darker. I feel it replacing pieces of me, little by little. The MRI on Monday confirmed it. A tumor in the same region as my father's, connected to that old infection site on my cheek where the scar still faintly remains. I'm going to fight it as hard as I can. I don't know how long I'll be able to hold on. You're all so lucky I'm still holding this thing back. Some traditions should have died out generations ago. I come from a long line of morticians. Our family has run the Whitaker Funeral Home for over a century, back when horse-drawn carriages still carried the dead through these old industrial towns. I took over the embalming room when my father's hands grew too unsteady to hold a scalpel. In this part of the country, certain old families still insist on open casket wakes. They want their loved ones to look peaceful, as if they've simply fallen asleep in their finest clothes, while relatives gather around with coffee and quiet stories. It's delicate work, and I, Daniel Whitaker, was one of the best. Until last Tuesday, when the body of Victor Langford arrived. Victor was a wealthy businessman who died in a violent single-car crash on the interstate. The transport team rolled the heavy bag into my basement prep room, and the smell hit me immediately. Not just blood, but something sweeter and heavier, like spoiled chemicals mixed with decay. When I unzipped the bag, I understood why. The crash had mangled him badly. His chest was a mess of broken ribs and torn tissue. The left side of his face was caved in, bruised deep purple. But what stopped me cold was his skin. It had already turned a strange, dry, leathery amber color. There was no livor mortis, no settling of blood in the lower parts of the body. He looked mummified, even though he'd only been dead for a day. The family lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Harlan, stood in the doorway. "Make him look presentable for the viewing on Friday," he said flatly. "Cost is irrelevant. Just restore him." I worked under the bright overhead lights. Because the major arteries were destroyed in the crash, I had to use sectional embalming and careful hypodermic work. The injuries were extreme, but not unheard of. What was wrong was the texture of the tissue. When I made an incision to drain and inject, no blood came out. Instead, a thick, black, syrupy sludge slowly oozed onto the stainless steel table. By Wednesday night, exhaustion was setting in. While I was carefully wiring the shattered bones around his left eye socket, I thought I heard a faint, wet clicking sound from deep in his throat. I paused, probe in hand. The basement was quiet except for the steady rain drumming against the small windows near the ceiling. Just escaping gases, I told myself. The abdomen was ruptured. It happens. Thursday was when I began the major restoration on his chest. I widened the incision through the hardened tissue. It crunched dryly, like cutting thick leather. I reached inside to remove damaged material, and something sharp sliced through my glove. Bright red blood, my blood, dripped into the open cavity. I cursed, peeled off the glove, and rinsed the cut at the sink. When I returned with a flashlight and peered deeper between the ribs, I saw it. Nestled against the spine was a dense, web-like network of black fibers. Embedded in them were rows of tiny, translucent, hook-like structures. They didn't look human. They looked like something parasitic. As I stared in disbelief, A drop of my blood fell directly onto the black mass. The fibers twitched. They absorbed the blood hungrily, shifting to a vivid, pulsing purple. Cold panic surged through me. I grabbed the long, hollow trocar used for draining cavities and stabbed it hard into the center of the thing. The corpse's eyes snapped open, completely black, dilated, reflecting the fluorescent lights with an unnatural shine. Its jaw dropped open with a sickening crack. A piercing, metallic screech tore from its throat, rattling the instruments on my trays. The body convulsed violently. The black fibers exploded outward from the chest wound like a nest of writhing tendrils, whipping toward my face. One grazed my cheek, burning like acid. I screamed and fell backward off my stool. Grabbing the large glass container of concentrated embalming fluid, I smashed it over the thrashing body. The flammable mixture soaked the remains. I snatched the utility lighter I kept for sealing wax, flicked it, and dropped the flame. The room lit up in a roaring blue blaze. The thing on the table screamed, a chorus of overlapping voices howling in agony, while the black fibers shriveled and burned. Within minutes, the fire died down, leaving only a charred, smoking husk on the table. I sat on the cold floor, gasping for air, my heart pounding. The prep room was ruined. There was no way to explain this to the police or the powerful Langford family. I knew I had to run. Shaking, I went to the sink to wash the blood and soot from my face. I splashed cold water over my eyes and looked into the mirror to check the cut on my cheek. The wound had already stopped bleeding. The edges looked dry, leathery, and stained that same unnatural amber color. As I stared, frozen, the skin on my cheek split slightly. A tiny, black, thread-like fiber pushed its way out, probing the air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. With trembling hands, I pulled it out. It was a text from Harlan, the Langford family lawyer. "Hope the restoration is coming along well, Daniel. One thing I forgot to mention, our family has a particular tradition. We don't hire morticians just to preserve the dead. We hire them to test who's strong enough to carry the next generation. See you at Friday's wake."